When we talk about CSR, corporate social responsibility, indeed our topic is asking whether it's a timely intervention or it's merely a rip-off. But let's begin.
Well, I'll say you have given us a good backdrop to the topic, and I would add by saying that it's like the proverbial elephant. Depending on where you are standing, you might say that it looks like a long rope. If you are in front, you might say that it looks like something hard and prickly, and if you are at the side, it looks like a house or a building or whatever.
Right.
So all of those things that you have said are legitimate and right. Okay. Some say that, you know, you need to go beyond what is required to by law, but others to say that the fact that you are in business in itself means that you are being responsible, and that in fact to be profitable it's a responsibility, because you are taking societal assets. You are using our best brains, analysts, accountants, marketing people, you're using electricity, you're using water, you are using our space. The society allows you to exist. So if you don't make a profit, we are all in trouble. Okay. So when you go there, it means that the fact that you are in business means that if you don't make a profit, you are letting us all down. And then there's the other end of the continuum that says that, okay, so you are in our space. What are you giving back to us? You've got to do this, and you've got to do that, and you've got to do that other thing. And then others to say that, okay, whilst you are in our space, the government who is there as an arbiter or a referee. Right. So how does the government also come in? But of course, others also say that the government is the government can be the most irresponsible citizen of all to his people. If the government doesn't collect taxes, and the government collects taxes and doesn't use them well, the government doesn't do the things that it ought to do, to the extent that we then look to the corporates to do that, where we have that disconnect, then the government is also being irresponsible. So to recap, yes, it's all of those kinds of things, but there's a certain central element that you have to be responsible. Others say that we don't want to go there because with responsibility comes, the notion of responsibility comes this element of good and bad, right and wrong, morality and ethics and so on and so forth. But organizations are not human beings, quote unquote. It is human beings who man organizations. And some of the research that I have done shows that when you have, quote unquote, good people, when you have people who have religion, people who think that it's important to do good, they tend to behave in a certain way, and they take the organizations along with them. But are they doing that on using somebody else's money? That would be irresponsible. So you've got to balance a lot of things. In the end, are you responsible, and is everybody getting a fair crack of the whip? That's the question.
Kofi, what will be your own perspective on this matter, corporate social responsibility, and how it plays out?
Corporate social responsibility is the expression of a company's social conscience, okay, usually in acts that further the goals of society. Now, if you take that definition, it's the expression of a company's social conscience. Companies have many different consciences. And like Doc has just said, their primary goal is not to run society. And it shows itself as an expression. So you can't be thinking it and be just there and say, you know, I am responsible to my society and I'm just thinking. You have to act in some way. But those acts are acts that further society's goals. So those goals themselves are set by society. And so you see that in different places, what constitutes CSR is different, okay? And then you ask yourself, so once society has set what it will value as CSR, and then the company comes to choose which part of that it will do. So if you come to, for instance, Ghana or Third World, Africa, what we consider CSR here is not the same as what some other people consider CSR, for instance, in Europe or America.
How's that?
Yeah, because, for instance, if you take the companies that do what you call CSR, let's say in the US or wherever, they would pay people's hospital bills, they would give people scholarships to go to school. You don't find them necessarily digging a borehole. You don't find them putting electricity poles in place. You don't find them, you know, doing certain things which are more or less fundamental to living, okay? But over here, you have both. So I have categorized CSR in developing countries as two different things. There's what I call the moral ransom, okay? And then there's what I call the altruistic acts. Okay. The moral ransom is where you have a situation in a community which is deprived, not because of the company, but because the company is working there. Everybody looks at the company and it has to pay a moral ransom. Do something so people don't think evil of it. And I think that is really a negative thing, because indeed the company being in the community, all things being equal, contributes positively to it. I am not talking about companies that engage in criminal activity, companies that don't do what the law says, don't pay their taxes, don't respect the district assembly. Companies doing everything by the book still have to pay a moral ransom. Otherwise, they may even be attacked. And that is not too good. And then there are some acts of CSR. Today, you see companies paying people's health bills. They don't have to do it. They don't really get anything direct except the good feeling that comes from these things. And that is more close to the altruistic acts, acts which may not bring them anything directly or may not prevent anything, by just the goodwill and feeling of sharing things. And if you talk about what society's goals are, what people see as society's goals here may be different from what people see as society's goals elsewhere. In other places, they look at the environment. So CSR means you are doing things green. Your production is green. Your, everything is green. It is not giving money to people. And if you are giving money to people and your production systems and whatever are not considered green enough, you'll be considered, as a bad company. Okay. Over here, it requires us to, do water and health and electricity kind of thing. So I like to bring that distinction.
But that's a quick one. Like we say, it requires us. Is CSR a requirement?
It is not a requirement because, like I said, it is an expression of a company's social conscience. Okay. But then again, the dichotomy comes in. In our parts of the world where you are confronted with abject poverty, okay, and then again, that is why it becomes a moral ransom. It almost becomes a requirement. And I've heard people talk about legislating CSR.
Can we?
It is so wrong. All right. It is totally wrong thinking, because anytime you legislate something like that, it becomes a tax, no matter what you call it. Okay, so indeed, we can choose to do whatever we want to do, but we must not forget that we are in competition for scarce dollars. Right. And you can't collect people's taxes and let them run your societies for you as if they are government. Okay. So I think that in itself is bad.
Doc, in Ghana, what can people look out to and point at and say this is CSR? As Kofi has just said, you cannot, to his mind, legislate these matters. Because then it becomes something else, So really, can people look out and say this represents CSR, that represents CSR? Or it's just a term that people just, use without really having the ability? How are you able to explain it to, say, a 10-year-old?
I'll go back to my example of the elephant. If we all agree that it is an elephant, then we can begin to agree how it looks like and what it eats and how it walks and all those kinds of things. But taking a cue from some of the things that Kofi has said, you see, because the CSR concept too, it's so broad, sometimes it helps to also break it down. If we say that in the space that we are operating it now, because of the lack of certain basic things that we have, perhaps here it will be important for companies to do the basics, to obey the law, for instance. Here we are grappling with issues of companies being chased to pay social security contributions of their staff. That is a responsible business thing. And if you don't do it, it means that you are going against the law. It's legislation. And some people argue that that is CSR. There's also CSR at the workplace. You read about people going to work and coming back minus some body parts. They go to work and they get killed or they get sick. That is a CSR thing in respect to occupational health and safety. There's marketplace. You go and buy biscuits, and the biscuits company, the guy who does the biscuits, gives you some meat in addition to the biscuits. I mean, that's serious product issues, and that is CSR. And then there is, beyond that, the altruistic, the discretionary. Okay, I'm making some money out of this space, so what else can I do? And when you go down that path, that's where a lot of companies and a lot of us tend to think that if a company comes and gives us a fat check, they are being good, quote unquote. But this same company, if we went and opened their books, we'll see that they haven't paid taxes or they have gone to great lengths not to do certain kinds of things, or they are engaged in certain questionable business practices, corruption, and all those kinds of things. So I'll say that if in doubt, look at what is being done elsewhere. We have things that guide us. There's UN Global Compact, there's World Business Council on this, and there's that. And what do they say? They say, okay, if you think that you want to do business and make money, fine, but don't employ underage people. That is child abuse and that's child labor. So I'll say that the good thing to do really is to start from the basics. Some of the things that we have done teach us that companies like to be seen to be good companies, but they like to do that in a PR setting. So you go there, you don't know what is CSR and what is marketing, what is PR and what is CSR. The basics are not there, but they say, yeah, well, we'd like you to look at us in a good light. And by the way, a lot of the research also tells us that when you do CSR well, you do it strategically, it also benefits you. So in the end, really, what's the loss? You're not losing.
But I need to understand this, because you brought in legal requirements,
yes,
social security payments, etc., and all
yeah,
of those, and said that theoretically, probably there's a school,
yes,
that reasons that is also part of CSR.
Yeah.
But really, strictly speaking, is that CSR if CSR is not a matter of legislation?
There are two things. There are aspects of CSR that can be helped by legislation, because the government's responsibility to the government enacts laws, and its responsibility to make sure that those laws are followed. But the point is, if you are a business and you are not in the business of doing things by the law, then you shouldn't exist. So it becomes we are in it together for both of our goods, because if the government is not in a position to ensure that you do good business, nobody will tell you to pack off. I mean, there are states that we classify as what? Rogue states, or, you know, you can't do business there. And so why would you go there? But you are here because perhaps there is a certain atmosphere and a certain environment that is conducive to your doing business. So you also have a stake. So if you have that stake, how can you grow that stake if you don't want to go by certain, shall we say, principles of good business sense or responsible business? So in the end, it benefits all of us, but it is the way it is done. And I'm also saying that you can do it strategically, just in the same way as you source your funds, in the same way as you're, you know, putting in place your distribution channels, in the same way as you're filing your tax returns, etc., etc. There's a science and an art to it.
Kofi, really, so I need to understand this. If a company exists, like this company, or any other company out there, and all of that, is the company able to argue if that, well, it's also involved in CSR, because really it doesn't owe social security for anybody, it honors its IRS obligations on time, it has tax clearance certificates all the time, all those are a bit part of the social responsibility that they have. They don't embark on any projects, they don't do anything on the moral side of things, as you say, or on the altruistic side of things. Would you say that they are embarking on CSR?
You know, I think that the proponents of CSR are wresting for themselves something that doesn't belong. When I teach CSR as part of ethics in business, what I tell people is that let's see it for what it is. Paying taxes is not CSR. It's a matter of law. Occupational safety is not CSR. You have to do it, or you get sued, or the government should close you down. If you are engaging in racism at work, you should be closed down. All right? If you are polluting the environment, it's a matter of law. You should be closed down. Okay, product quality, not making sure that your products are of, you know, a wholesome nature and whatever, it's not CSR. It's pure law, plain and simple. So again, what from the beginning CSR was and what it should still be is an expression of social conscience beyond what is required of you by law. Okay? So if a company is doing the things it has to do by law, I don't see any CSR issues there. But then again, it is okay to call them a responsible company because they are doing the right thing. Then comes the issue of, so what if this company is doing everything right, but not donating to an orphanage? Is that company being responsible? Yes. Companies are set up to make profits and make as much of it as they can in a legal way. And when they make those profits, it goes to their shareholders, who also deploy them in different ways. We should not saddle companies with running communities, providing water. After all, if you take our setting, for instance, companies are providing their own water in a sense. They are providing their own electricity in a sense. Some are making roads.
Even
all right?
Individuals are doing all you are saying.
You know,
people build houses in plush places like East Legon.
yes.
And they have to construct their own.
multi-million-dollar investment in those places.
I'll be speaking to Dr. Tony Obin pretty soon. He's CEO of the Chamber of Mines, Kofi. And definitely, would it be a legitimate question to ask him what it is that the mining companies have done in these communities and whether they've built enough hospitals and roads and schools and pipe-borne water and all of those things? Is this something that we can demand of them?
No. And indeed, to push it further, we should not demand these things of them. Again, look at things as they are. It is not the responsibility of companies to build schools, hospitals, roads, and provide water. It is the responsibility of companies to act according to their mandates, to do what they have been set up to do and maximize returns thereof. So they can pay taxes to the right authorities, and the authorities will go and produce those things. And let me say quickly, it is government that makes the law on how much to tax you. So government can raise the taxes to whatever level they want to raise it to. So if we deem that this is how much we need to go and provide these things, then let's tax them to hell or heaven, okay? And then go provide these things and let them make a choice whether to come or not. We have a situation where we are burning the candle from two ends. We are taxing them, we are adding all kinds of things to the taxation, and then we are demanding of them, both from a governmental level and the moral ransom from the society that build these things for us. It does a number of things. I don't know if you have time to go into it, but number one, what it does is it takes the company's focus from its core duties. And so it is inefficient both in doing its job and inefficient in providing social services. So it is not a legitimate question. But then let me hasten to ask that we find ourselves in a milieu and a system where, because of the stark poverty staring at us, and let me add, the ineptitude and inefficiencies within our government, okay, that companies are being directly called upon to do some of these things, and they find themselves having to do them for their own peace of mind's sake, which is why I call it a ransom.
Doc, I have an article before me where CSR in Ghana is described as a sham. According to this article, these are the words of Ebo Hazel Ferguson. It says that he's quoted as saying that the projects companies do and call corporate social responsibility in Ghana is a sham. He's Corporate Affairs and Community Relations Director at Sigma-based Technical Services, Ghana Limited. And actually, I think he met a group of journalists from Ghana and Uganda at a 10-day workshop to strengthen their knowledge on the skills of reporting oil, gas, and mining in Africa. And he goes on to say that if you compare what they gave, he said, comparing it with the high profit they make, this is tokenism. They do not even consult the members of the community for which these projects are meant for. The CSR should be about what the indigenes need and not what the companies think that they want. I'm putting this side by side against what Kofi just said, that it is not something we can demand of them, can say that they hold them by the scruff of the neck and say, provide this and that. And yet, despite all their efforts, this gentleman, as you have it, also says that what they are doing is a sham, it's tokenism compared to the profits that they make. How do we balance these competing interests?
That is the vice in which a lot of companies find themselves in. Right now, BP don't have a good name. When you talk BP, you are talking about what's happening in the Niger Delta and other places. But not too long ago, BP went to one of the Central Asian republics to go and do their business. And they found that the government and its systems were not set up to be able to tax them. And so BP sat down with the people and said, look, guys, this is our business, and this is how these kinds of things are done. This is BP. You cut from Central Asian Republic to Texas or offshore oil in America, and BP is known as broken pipes. So, because of the American experience. But when you go to a Central Asian Republic, without BP, do not have a tax system that is set up to tax an oil company. You understand? So, as I keep saying, there are the basics that you have to do. You can look at CSR through lots of prisms and say that it looks like this and it looks like that. If it isn't there, you've got to be able to obey what the government says you should do. As BP found itself in, as it were, Turkmenistan or somewhere, they didn't have the tax thing. They could easily say, okay, well, you don't have the tax, we just pay what we want. But they said, look, if we continue in this regard, somebody is going to come around and say, ah, yes, look at BP. You understand? But
let me bring Dr. Tony Obin into the discussion. Good evening to you, Doc.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you very much for joining us. We're discussing corporate social responsibility tonight. You are CEO of the Chamber of Mines. And when we talk about CSR in Ghana, many people always use the mining companies as their first example to talk about communities in which they operate, issues about possible pollution, deprivation of those communities as far as social amenities are concerned, and all of that. Staying specifically with the mining community where you are and the communities in which you operate, would you say that your CSR output is good enough?
Well, thank you so much, and good evening to your panelists and your viewers. I think in this country, if we are talking about any particular sector that makes significant contribution to CSR, I think it's the mining sector. And again, the difficulty in getting a very well-cut definition of CSR. But in a way that we generally understand CSR, I think if we are talking about CSR in this country, I think it is really the mining industry. And the people have tried to benchmark the industry. Don't forget that there's a legacy issue that the industry is dealing with. Most of the challenges that the mining industry worldwide, and Ghana inclusive, is dealing with is actually based on past records where the industry was more an enclave activity, which I normally jokingly call it a conclave activity, where everything happened in a very secluded and exclusive domain. Now, I think that in the last 20, 15 years, you would see conscious efforts being made by mining companies to include CSR as part of their strategy. There's no mining company in Ghana now that doesn't include CSR as its key strategy, because it's a good thing to do. It really impinges on your profit. No, it doesn't take away your profit. So and the mining company, more than any other, the mining sector, more than any sector in this country, recognizes the benefits of CSR, and they do it concretely. Now, let me give you a few examples. When you go to some of the communities, I will not be naming communities specifically, the roads that you see, some of the typical, because most of these mining companies are found in typical rural settings where government, activities hardly go there. So you see roads that have been constructed or maintained regularly by mining companies. You see electricity being extended to communities. You see schools being built by communities. And I always say that there is no mining community in this country. I'm talking about the regular mining communities, not those by other type of mining like Galamsey and so on, that you will find any school on the tree. That doesn't exist. If there existed anything like that, they have been replaced with maybe better schools, with some other teaching and learning materials. To the extent that in some communities you have teachers accommodation that really attract good and young teachers. So and again, hundreds of community members are now going to the university. They are going to secondary schools because communities have been, companies have established scholarship schemes that seek to support some of these members. So seriously speaking, I think if we're going to be very fair, to the industry, I think it is one industry that understands and recognizes the benefit of CSR in communities where they operate. Are
you able, in a minute or less, to tell me what your understanding of CSR really is? Has it got anything to do with requirements of the companies, or it just has to do with, as it were, what you feel like doing in these communities?
Well, if you look at it from the point of view of responsibility, then it's broader. It looks like you have to be responsible. You pay your taxes. You pay your statutory. You sort of honor your statutory obligations. So that's a responsibility. And then beyond it, go for those that are not really written in books or that are not necessarily required by agreement, but that are useful for improving the lives and livelihoods of people or of communities whose environment you operate. So for me, it goes beyond the statutory requirement, which is also a responsibility, to areas that would normally not have been touched on by a business entity. And don't forget that every business is business. The bottom line is profit. But I think it's more the quality of profit that we're looking at. You cannot make profit at the back of a certain environment. You cannot make profit by destroying the water sources, the drinking water sources of people. You cannot make profit by making the neighbors look very poor and impoverished. So this is what I see as corporate social responsibility. Don't look too much at an immediate benefit in terms of your bottom line, because that's what everybody will look at from business point, your bottom line. But in corporate social responsibility, your immediate benefit should not be looked at from the bottom line, and your expenses should not just be seen because it's either bringing you direct benefit or not. It is something that is good, that increases the level of living of the communities, and that impinges on your own reputation as a company. And for mining companies, I think because they directly impinge on nature, they mine from the rocks, from the earth. So there's a direct interaction with nature. If you cut trees, if you dig the ground, you must put something directly back. It doesn't mean that other non-directly nature impacted sectors should not be responsible. But I think for mining companies, I see the reason why we definitely have to, and we are responding actively to that call.
Okay, so to you, it's a two-pronged thing, the legal requirements bit and the part that is not backed necessarily by law, but which you do because you want to improve the community in which you live in.
Yes, because it is a good thing to do, and yes, and it gives you even your social license to operate.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Obin. We have to leave it here. Dr. Obin is the Chief Executive Officer of the Chamber of Mines. Thank you very much. We have to take a quick commercial break at this stage. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Previously on Link Up. Proudly yours.
Don't need champagne and caviar, cocktails with movie stars. All I need is you. Don't need a motor yacht, sent to exotic spots. Paradise I've already got. All I need is you. All I need is you. All I need is you. All I need is you.
Imperial leather, now with classy new look. Imperial leather, one of life's little luxuries.
In today's challenging world, information technology has become the one-stop option, and Beacon Ghana, an IT solutions and training provider, offers you the requisite training in Microsoft, Cisco, Oracle, Unix, Linux, and many IT courses. The Beacon IT student, after writing the external exams, qualifies with internationally recognized certificates, and job placements and attachments in reputable firms are made available to students who excel. Lectures are in the mornings, afternoons, evenings, and on weekends. Locate Beacon Ghana IT on the second floor, Meshamas House, Nansuman Junction, on the Kaneshi Odoko Highway. Call +233 302 240027 or visit www.beaconghana.com. Beacon Ghana, the IT solutions and training providers.
Thank you for staying with us. We are talking CSR today, and or tonight, I should say. Of course, your messages are coming. We'll start taking them pretty soon. But from what I've gathered from in the discussion, it seems as if there's any disagreement or departure from the center, is whether we can add your legal responsibilities to what we call CSR or not. And you, Doc, and Dr. Obing seem to think that, well, if there are legal requirements on you, that's your CSR, because it also has to do with responsibility. And Kofi seems to think that, no, let's cut those ones out. Let's see what you are doing beyond what you are mandated to do as an organization, and that will be your CSR. Yes. If that's correct. So that seems to be the point of departure. And in fact, there's a text message here from Ofori in Kumasi. He says CSR goes beyond being philanthropic. Mm-hmm. It includes being law-abiding and responsible to the people who work within the organization. I don't know. And especially for you, Doc, you didn't exactly say that that's your position. You just told me that is what is in the literature.
I want my position. Well,
you know,
I come from, well, I'm an academic, so I teach courses in that area, and I also run a center in collaboration with the GIZ. And our point of departure was that we said, okay, we wanted to consider or interrogate what people and how people understand CSR and what they consider to be CSR. So we found a wide range of things from, oh yeah, we go to Osu Children's Home and we do this and we do that. By the way, when you ask them, so who is responsible for your CSR? I say, go and check somebody in the marketing. You go there, you find somebody who says, yeah, every year I spend 2 hours of my time on CSR. I said, well, this is not CSR, this is not serious CSR. So my position is that I think it's useful to open people's eyes up to responsible business. We are starting from a situation where in a lot of sectors in this country, it is zero, it is zilch. So if people say that, yes, we've heard about it, but we don't really know what it is, then I'm saying that, okay, perhaps you want to look at this and this and that. This is what it is. But by the way, the fact that you are in business and you are making profit doesn't make you irresponsible. What we are saying is that, for instance, when you go to work and you close, do you leave all of your lights on? Perhaps it's not important here. In other places, they are worrying about carbon footprint and so on and so forth. But in a case where, as we are sat here now, some people don't have light, is it responsible business to leave all of your lights on? Or if you are leaving your office for more than 5 minutes, to leave your AC on and so on and so forth. So in that regard, you see that a CSR is not really going to give the 2,000 to somebody outside there. You have workplace CSR internally, and some of them are not regulated by law, like Factories Inspectorate or SNIT or tax. Leaving your lights on, nobody is going to arrest you, but it is irresponsible. And so perhaps I don't have a position. My position is that one has got to be responsible, but the how and the where and the what, those then becomes huge issues that companies have to deal with. And I think it is in expressing those things that people say perhaps it is hogwash or it is, you know, PR and so on and so forth. That's where it can get a little bit muddy. But if we consider that fundamentally it is good to be responsible, and in any case, if we were to go beyond our space, some actually define CSR in terms of sustainability. That when you have left this place, past and gone, what have you left with those other people who are coming in future? So in those kinds of spheres, we also ought to look at what we are leaving behind. That's why the extractive industry people tend to get a lot of stake, because once you go there and you dig the thing out, is finished. Who is going to put the gold back?
It's a finite resource.
Yes, it's gone.
Right.
So what are you going to do? So that's why they tend to get those things. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting the gold out. But are you doing the way it ought to be done? And by the way, after all said and done, how are people going to feel about you? Others say that, look, you can do good business and still be good and still make money. Or that indeed it is your responsibility to make the world a better place than you came to, you know, find it, etc., etc. So there are a lot of issues in it, and I would say that basically in this country you find that the companies tend to operate on a continuum. There are those who say, well, I'm not interested and I don't want to know. There are those who say, I'm interested but I don't know how to do it. And there are those who are on the cutting edge of it, who say that we will be responsible in all that we do, to the environment, to the workplace, to the community, to the marketplace, and then beyond that, we will do social investment.
Okay.
We will leave a good footprint.
All
so I think that it's a continuum.
Kofi?
Yeah. So Doc is saying, well, maybe he doesn't have a position, so I want to make it clear there is a position. And it's very easy. There are things that if a company does, they are not illegal.
Okay.
So nobody can hold them to it. Okay? Now, we are calling obeying the law an act of responsibility. It is true. It's like saying paying your child's school fees is an act of responsibility. Of course it is.
That's not law.
No, I know.
Your child's school fees.
I am making the analogy.
They go home.
Try and understand the analogy. You obey the law, you pay taxes, and you are defining it as part of the act of responsibility.
Yes.
And I'm saying paying your child's school fees, therefore, is also an act of responsibility. But if you look at it in that sense, it's something that you should do anyway. And if you didn't do it, the law could actually take you up. So now let's come to corporate social responsibility. It is actually the things that you are not required to do by law, which if you don't do, nobody can take you on. There are things that the law does not require you to do, which can set society back. And there are things that the law does not require you to do, whether you do or not, you are neutral. And there are things that you can do which are not required by law, which progresses society. So for instance, if you go to work and leave all your air conditions on, all your lights on, and you leave the water running, okay, you are wasting resources. Now, you are setting society back. There is no law that says you can't leave your lights on. So if you act in those ways, and there's no law asking you to do it, but you switch on all the lights in your office before you go, you are actually being responsible beyond your legal requirements in a way that is not setting society back, but you are not necessarily pushing us forward. And then there are some people who are neutral. They make their profit, they pay their taxes, they take care of their employees, they do everything fine, okay, and they just live. They don't do anything against, they don't do anything for. And then there are those who do things for. After paying their taxes, doing everything, they then take 10%, 5%, 1% of their profit and donate it, not because the law requires them to do it or anything. So there's a position. The things you do which are required by law are technically not CSR. They are legal requirements. Now, after that, there are things that you can do which can set society back. If you refrain from doing them, you should be commended, like leaving your lights on. And then there can be companies that are social neutral in that sense. They don't do anything bad, they don't give you a donation as well. Okay, they should be maybe encouraged. But those are the ones I'm saying, you don't pressure them, okay, to go beyond that. You just encourage them, all right? And then there are those who we should commend, who after doing everything right, take a piece of cash and then help somebody or help a community, help a society, and then we move on. And I think this is important because not defining what CSR is leading to all kinds of situations. You read this article, which I've also read, by Hazel.
That's
and
right.
he's basically lambasting these companies and saying they are doing things as tokenism. Who requires them to do it? You don't have any call on their resources. So if you haven't asked for, you know, something and they just come and give it to you, you don't like it, leave it. Okay? So the lack of a definition and the lack of a clear structure as to what we are looking for is contributing to the confusion in that area. And let me tell you something. Companies check these things. They check how much moral ransom they'll be asked to pay if they entered a particular space. So it's important for us to define it and important for us to decide how we are going to treat different companies, because you know what? The window dressing has led to a point where some companies which are not doing their job, okay, are actually going out and making donations and getting a good name, okay, so that basically they will not be chased. And some of them, if you go and see some of the conditions under which their workers work and all kinds of situations, they're really not even doing what the law requires them to do. So we really need to define these things well.
Kojo Kumavi sends us a message. Interesting. I hear all of a sudden now companies are being named in these text messages. I think that I will spare that, those direct mentioning, especially since you're talking about CSR. And my article that I'm referring to here, I mean, there are a number of sources for Wikipedia. You have to use rather cautiously, especially when you have academics near you, because then the sources become a question. But there's one here that mentions all the issues about business ethics, ISO 26000 standards, etc., principles for responsible investments by the UN and all. But then there's a line here that says it is widely accepted that CSR adheres to similar principles. That's all the principles I'm mentioning, multinational corporations and what they should use and stakeholder interest and all of that. But with no formal act of legislation, is what it says here. So that you cannot sue a company for not embarking on CSR. And if that is true, then you wonder where the SNIT's contribution and those things become, because you can sue them for not paying SNIT.
Absolutely.
You know, so that becomes a definitional issue for us. But Kojo Kumavi says that, okay, he sent me the earlier message where he's talking about a particular cement company. Says that it has brought a lot of dust on the Aflao police station road or so, which is just unbearable. He says that the cement dust pollution in the eastern portion of the company goes beyond human rights. However, government officials come and hide under the cover of corporate social responsibility. And for him, because you say CSR and there's no compulsion, then they are hiding behind that. But if they are polluting the environment, I think it's a different matter altogether. Kojo Kumavi then goes on to say that his visit to that cement company shows how socially irresponsible foreign companies can be in Ghana. And that this dust is just unbearable, okay, and all that. So that's what I've read. And it says that they are just exploiting poor communities. Susanna Mauli says CSR is used by some companies to deceive the poor and underprivileged. There are some companies that cause heavy pollution and provide a token as social responsibility. Here at Christian Young, I'll get a response to this one about the pollution and environmental issue. I think that you should address it before we go. Most of these companies in our communities are causing more damage to the indigenous. I think it is high time the government stood up and imposed a reasonable amount of tax on them. Some are even using the country's electricity without paying. They only focus on their profit-making ideology and ignore the temperature of poverty invading the indigenous in the country. Interesting way to put it. We have to go. I'll give you a minute each. I hope that in your minutes each, you're able to address how these things that you're talking about, environmental degradation and all that, and whether you can hide behind CSR in doing that. But really, you have just 60 seconds to deal with that.
No, I'll sum up by stating my non-position that really it rests on a continuum. If you say that you are, in your own mind, you are being responsible, but you are not going according to laws and regulations, to me, it is irresponsible. But once you do those things, what are the extra things that you are doing? So you have the cake. We all recognize that it is a cake, but it would be nice and a much better cake, tastier, if you had some icing on it. And that icing you might characterize for some people as being CSR, but you must have the cake. Okay. And for me, it is part of CSR, the cake and the icing together.
Kofi.
So there's a position. And the position is this. If you are polluting the environment, you are breaking the law. And there are rules, there are regulations, and there are laws. Right. Either the government can take you up, the district assembly can take you up, or a citizen can sue, and they must do so. If you are not respecting the fundamental laws underlying your operation, you don't have any business doing CSR. Indeed, you are being responsible on two levels. You are breaking the law and you are affecting the community. There are times you break the law, you don't directly affect the community. So for me, defining what CSR is very important, because then we close the loopholes so people don't break the law and then come around. I believe this cement company has been making donations here and there, and maybe because they target as few people who they know might have the whip and they could crack on them, okay, they can get away with what they are doing. So if you ask me, nobody should do CSR if they have not obeyed the laws underlining their operation. So there's a position, okay, and we must be very, very clear about that. Then people won't complain about tokenism.